The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. We are back and we have some coaching news. My name is Mike, here with Sam. How you doing, Sam?
Happy to be here. Very happy that some coaching news dropped for us on a Sunday of all
That's
days,
right.
so we can actually record on a Sunday night here. Get back to like a truly regular schedule. The conference finals are set. We talked a little bit about like playoffs, a few days ago on our bonus pod, and I'm sure I will be very excited to watch those series coming up. I'm sure you are as well. It does kind of feel like the Oklahoma City Thunder heavy favorites, but so be it. I think the Eastern Conference Finals especially are going to be really fun to watch. But yeah, we actually have some Suns news to cover today, like extensively. I would say for, I don't know, like how long you want to spend talking about coaching candidates here, but we've got 9 names on the block that, I have a lot of Wikipedia pages pulled up in various tabs here. I'm ready to go.
I think that this is I want to spend some time on each of these guys because I think they all deserve some form of conversation here. But what we got today, and I do, by the way, want to just at least touch on the conference finals before the end of this podcast. Remind me if I forget. But what we got today was a huge drop
Number
of news.
one Anthony Edwards fan, Mike V. Hill. I know that's who you're gunning for.
Well, the reason I thought of it, I kind of think they might win this.
Honestly,
and
I hope
think you don't. So I think it's kind of interesting.
I don't at all, but I hope you're right because I think that would be fascinating. I think that would be so fascinating.
I think
Anyway.
I think they've been better than OKC in the playoffs, but OKC at times has a higher ceiling, so we'll see.
Yeah, and then. But anyway, okay, we'll cover that on next week's episode or something. Coaches,
what we got today was a news drop from Chris Haynes, and then a little tag team by Jake Fisher to add on to it. But is essentially a list of candidates that the Suns are bringing back for a second interview. Now, the rumors was they had as many as 15 to 20 people for the first interview. And now we're seeing that they have a secondary interview that they're narrowing it down to apparently 9. It was originally reported as an Elite 8, a little too quick with the branding.
The Elite
by
9.
Chris Haynes.
We're
the Elite
rebranding
9.
Can you think of anything? What in this, like tournaments just work in such perfect numbers, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, whatever. Does 9, the number 9, does that represent anything in popular culture? I can't think of anything. The Supreme Court? Like what else is like represented by the number 9? That's the only thing I can think of.
I'm sure there's people shouting something at their podcast app right now.
I think the Supreme Court is the closest. So which Supreme Court member do you think James Borrego would be?
That's a great question. I'd have to do a little more research on him, I think, because I'm obviously an expert on the Supreme Court justices. There was 9 people total that we know. And it's kind of interesting, I think, the way that this coaching search has been reported. It's almost like a reality show style situation here with the Suns, which feels a little silly, but like I don't know what it's supposed to look like. It's not like these jobs are open that often. And the process that you use to get to the final coach, it's not like it's this distinct process that makes sense for every team. You kind of just have to go through what you have to go through. But starting with as many as 20, narrowing it down to 9. Supposedly, according to Gambo, this is where it starts to sound a little reality TV show-ish. They're going to narrow it down to 3 after that, and then those 3 contestants will have like one final chance to pitch their vision of what the Suns is and see how aligned it is
Like
with
it's
everyone
Shark
else.
Tank. You just bring them on, and there's a panel of Ishbia and Brian Gregory and
Isaiah
Bartlestein,
Thomas,
I guess.
And,
Oh God. Yeah.
Mateen Cleaves is there. So, the final 3, and then we'll get some coach. Probably. I'm guessing by the end of next week. I can't imagine once the news is out there, this whole process is going to take very long.
I mean, look, the draft is in a month, and they don't like they need to figure out. I mean, the draft is important, in and of itself. They have 2 picks, so even if they don't trade anyone else on draft night, like that's important. But also, they should have a trading strategy. They should have a strategy for their summer going into the draft because they could make big moves on draft night. And they need to figure out what they're doing with Bradley Beal before they arrive at that date as well. So they need to button this up pretty fast because, they need to get going for sure.
Yeah, they really do. They don't have that much time to get everyone on the same page and get things going. And this is their opportunity to do that. I'll read the names, and then I want to talk about each of them individually, of course, what stood out about the initial list to you, and then what we think it means for this franchise going forward, because I think there are some interesting things to glean from all of this. Sean Sweeney, Mavs assistant. David Fizdale, current Suns assistant coach. James Borrego, former NBA head coach. Johnny Bryant, current Cavs assistant. Jordan Ott, also a Cavs assistant coach. Steve Hetzel, interesting name. We'll talk about him in more detail. Micah Nori. Dave Bliss, somebody that I had never heard about.
Wolves
current assistant coach. Someone who
still working.
Who stepped in and coached. Yeah, still working. Someone who stepped in and head coached after their coach tore his ACL because, who was it? Okogie bumped into him? Something? I don't know.
Yeah, it was Josh Okogie, actually. Yeah, that was right. That was in the playoffs last year.
Dave Bliss, OKC assistant coach. Chris Quinn was the addition that was added post Chris Haynes report. This was Jake Fisher that said Chris Quinn was also included in this. Chris Quinn is a current Miami Heat head coach. A couple of names that we've talked about in the past. Micah Nori, Chris Quinn, Johnny Bryant are really the main. Oh, Sean Sweeney, I think we mentioned too, are the main assistant coaches that we've talked about in the past. Jordan Ott was someone that was brought up, I believe, by Mark Stein a few weeks ago, immediately relevant to the conversation because he went to MSU, Michigan State. We have since found out that Steve Hetzel went to Michigan State. These are 2 of the 9 candidates are MSU alum. I think they have a unique step up on the competition here that is not replicable by the rest of them. So we'll see where that lands them.
I will just say Jordan Ott had been brought up previously, like you said. Steve Hetzel, who you're right, we're going to talk about, was the biggest, for me, kind of new name that I just hadn't heard ever before.
Dave Bliss, I've heard his name as an assistant for OKC, but I hadn't heard of him as a potential head coaching candidate yet. So lots of names here. I just your initial reaction to this list, and I'll let you know mine as well.
Sure. Well, based on the expectations coming in, I think there was one thing that kind of tracked and one that didn't. I expected this list to look like a lot of young, mostly first-time head coaches because that's what we were told to expect from Gambo a few weeks ago. And sure enough, with the exception of David Fizdale and James Borrego, who each have been head coaches for like a few years each, both of those guys are still young, by the way.
Fizdale's younger than I thought when I looked his age up. Yeah,
I mean he's definitely still in his 40s, right?
He's 50 right now.
Yeah,
I have all their age, all the ages that are available. I have them all.
I want to say Micah Nori is the oldest, and he's like in his early 50s.
51.
Yeah. So yeah, they're all young, and 7 of the 9 would be first-time head coaches.
A couple in their 30s. Yeah.
So that doesn't surprise me at all. What does surprise me a little bit is we expected. And I don't know if we expected this because I don't think it was coming from any particular intel. I think we just thought maybe after the way the Vogel and Budenholzer regimes both went up in flames, that there was something to the idea of the players want a former player. And again, I don't think Gregory, he didn't say anything about that in his introductory press conference. It was just sort of like common sense to us that maybe there's something there. The players would trust a former player. And there's only one former NBA player on this list of 9, and that's Chris Quinn, who was added last.
And he wasn't even part of the initial report. Yeah, so the initial report for me was not a single NBA player. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I think, probably the biggest thing that stood out to me on this list at first as well. The other thing, I think Fizdale's name was a surprise to me, and we'll talk about what that means. And beyond that, it was the names of people that were not on the list. And that is Jared Dudley, Royal Ivey, and Sam Cassell, I think, were the big ones. Chris Quinn at first, but then, of course, he is now supposedly going to be interviewed again.
Yeah, well,
these are,
again,
by the way, 3 former NBA players that I'm talking about, not on the list.
So those are surprising to me because they are former NBA players, right? But beyond that, the connections that they have specifically to the Suns, it's like I can see why Matt Ishbia has no... The fact that they're NBA players is intriguing to me, or former NBA players, but Matt Ishbia in particular has no connection. He has no personal connection to Jared Dudley and Jared Dudley's time on the Suns. Not to mention the only guy who Jared Dudley played with who's still on the Suns, obviously, is Devin Booker. Yeah. So I get it. Similarly, Royal Ivey was a KD teammate, correct? And
they're friends, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people had thrown that out. Guys, there's a 98% chance that KD is not on the roster next year. So I just
think
feel
this list kind of points at that
kind of
being
confirms
100.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never really saw that, sure, okay, that's great. A couple of these guys on the list actually did work for OKC while KD was there, or Brooklyn while KD was there. You know, there are a couple guys here who know KD for sure, but I just don't think that's something they're really prioritizing because I don't really think they see a future where they run it back, to be entirely honest.
And honestly, even if KD does stay, he's signed for 1 season.
Right.
So how much should that factor into your decisions if you do end up keeping him? It shouldn't. Each of these guys, interesting on their own. Another thing I'll say about all of this is, well, I'll start here. I don't think David Fizdale should be our coach.
Yeah,
but they should give him an opportunity to be interviewed, and I don't think it's unfair to give him the interview opportunity. It didn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me at all to see his name in the list. Because can you imagine? Okay, maybe he made it to the second round. I guess he must have done well in the first interview. But you're gonna interview 20 guys and imagine not giving your associate head coach, because that's what David Fizdale was, a chance. You have to give him a chance to say, I mean, no one knows our players better than he does of this list of guys, right? Yeah, he was there.
And he deserves a chance to specifically say what he believes went wrong and to differentiate himself from the Budenholzer regime. He gets to be the Kamala Harris of this process, right? Yeah. You know, you give him that opportunity, you give him a chance. It doesn't mean I think he's a front runner, but it did not 1% surprise me to see his name on this list.
His record as a head coach, I looked it up. Have you done any research on him since he was on this list? I knew it was bad.
I mean, he was with the Knicks. Does it count? When
they still underperformed when he was their coach, I think. So it's 34% win percentage. He's 71 and 134 as a head coach. That's his overall win percentage. 1 playoff series coach, they lost in 6 games, 2-4. But 34% win percentage for a head coach and somebody who famously, I think, really failed. And it's an interesting, I think, situation for him.
The 2018-19, oh my God, I have to quiz you. I'm sorry. The 2018-19 New York Knicks. Can you name the top 3 scorers on that team?
There's no chance. 2018-19, so that's pre-Julius Randle.
Actually, can you name... I'll give you the top 5 scorers on this team. This was 6 years ago, okay? It wasn't that long.
Okay. Yeah.
The top 5 scorers on this team all averaged at least 13 points per game. At number 5, we've got 19-year-old Kevin Knox. At number 4, we have 26-year-old Ennis Freedom, who I believe was already Ennis Freedom at this point. Maybe still Ennis Cantor.
That's what he could do. He was capable of scoring.
That was their starting center. At number 3, Dennis Smith Jr., 14 points per game. At number 2, Emmanuel Mudiay, 14 points per game. And at number 1, 19 points per game, 26 years old, Tim Hardaway Jr. That has to be...
That's brutal.
That has to be in the first percentile of all number 1 scores in a single season of a team in NBA history. Tim Hardaway Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr. to be your top scorer. I'm sorry, that is not David Fizdale's fault.
You're right.
That roster is not his fault.
No, you're right. You're right. That is a terrible team, but I don't think he's done. I don't know. It's they're trying to wash this team of what happened last season, and bringing back the associate head coach does not. But it's also what they did with Brian Gregory. So we can't really say that this is something they won't do. Obviously Brian Gregory has previous ties to the owner, but he was with the team last year too, and they just promoted him. We've learned a little bit about that since, that supposedly the Suns were looking out there for other guys and they were not interested. Bob Myers included, and that's why they ended up promoting from within. But Fizdale is not the most exciting candidate for me. Outside of him is what I'll say. I kind of think that all of these guys have resumes that are worthy of being a head coach with the Suns. Enough teams that they've worked on, enough time in the NBA. It's not a Brian Gregory situation for me. These are all people who've been in the NBA a long time, and we could talk about each of them individually. Actually, let's start here. When you first heard this list, is there any name that stood out to you the most as someone who you think deserves this opportunity? Maybe someone that would excite you the most.
Yeah, I think, the resume here for a number of guys in particular is strong. I would say maybe there are 4 candidates who roughly equally excite me out of, and what do I know, right? Like I'm not sitting in on the interviews. I don't know exactly what these guys who are all assistant coaches, what their specific duties are for each team, because just because you're on a team that's in the conference finals right now, like Mike Nori or Dave Bliss or whatever, doesn't actually mean you're like that you have an outsized proportional that you're the reason that team is succeeding, right? So who knows? But in general, the guys with the strongest resumes, I do think Mike Nori has a strong resume. I think Chris Quinn has just been Spoelstra's right-hand man for a decade and has done awesome things with the Heat.
Yeah. 2014 is when he started with the Heat as a coach. He's been there since then. It's pretty crazy.
Johnny Bryant absolutely has a strong resume. If you look at, he spent the last decade with the Utah Jazz, who are always in the playoffs, alongside Quinn Snyder. And then he went to the Knicks, who have been pretty good for the past few years. And then this past season with the Cavs, who, look, I know how the Cavs went out, but that's a strong resume a guy who's worked with a lot of star players.
Yeah.
And then James Borrego. I like James Borrego. I do. I think.
Let's start there.
Sure. I'm happy to start there. I think he's maybe the easiest one to talk about because he's been in the spotlight before as a head coach. And maybe that was in Charlotte, and it's a small market. I often feel like being the head coach or the star player or any greatly involved person in the Charlotte Hornets organization, it's like, yes, you're in the NBA, but are you? The way that organization is run. But I think James Borrego is absolutely a guy who you talk to Hornets fans, and in hindsight, they really feel that he was done dirty by their organization. For those who don't remember what happened, Borrego spent 4 seasons with the Hornets. Over the past 3 the last 3 seasons that he was there, I think he got fired after the 2021 season. Maybe it's 21-22. I'll have to confirm that. But in the last 3 seasons that Borrego was the Hornets head coach, they got better every year. At first they were tanking. They drafted LaMelo Ball. Then they were okay in the rookie season with LaMelo Ball. And then in Borrego's final season, and he was fired after this, sophomore year for LaMelo Ball, the Hornets went 43-39.
Yeah.
They were their top 3 scorers were LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, and Terry Rozier. Really difficult guys to control in a locker room, I would say. Guys who were difficult to control both on and off the court is how I would describe the play styles of those 3 guys. And yet, they went 43-39. They finished top 10 in the league in 3-point volume. They were top 10 in steals. They were top 10 in blocks. Mm-hmm. I think, had the hallmarks of a team that kind of plays this sort of style of basketball that Gregory was talking about in his press conference, where it's like, we want to be modern, we want to shoot, but we also want to be gritty. And I think you look at a team like that, and they were a little bit gritty. And what's interesting about it, of course, they go above 500. Borrego gets fired. They bring back Steve Clifford, who had previously coached them in a previous stint. Mm-hmm. And in 2 straight seasons with Steve Clifford, they regress. Mm-hmm. Clifford gets fired. Charles Lee brought in this season. And I don't blame Charles Lee for this, because I think their roster has a lot of issues. But this season they regressed yet again, and they won, 17, 18 games? Yeah. Every season since James Borrego was fired, the Charlotte Hornets, who are still built around LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges, 2 players who Borrego coached, who have only gotten older since he was fired, every season since, that team has gotten worse. I think that is a very strong case for the fact that Borrego should get another shot as an NBA head coach.
They only have one. The Charlotte Hornets only have one team that won more games than that 21-22 team since 2010-11. And it was 2015-16, Kemba Walker. era Hornets, that's the only team that won more games than that team that James Borrego coached. And that team, it had, I think, more talent than you probably remember when looking at the James Borrego era. Like Gordon Hayward was on that team. He only played half the season, but like that was like rehabbing Gordon Hayward. If you remember, that wasn't quite the Gordon Hayward at his prime. PJ Washington was on that team very young. Kelly Oubre Jr., Montrezl Harrell was on that team. But they were essentially led by LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, and Miles Bridges. And if you think about a team led by LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, and Miles Bridges winning 43 games, I think you could easily make the case that he was maximizing the talent on that team.
100%. I mean, those are three really challenging players to build around defensively. And to be clear, they weren't a good defensive team. I brought up the steals and blocks numbers because I think that's telling of what he wanted to prioritize with the talent he had. That team was still somewhere in the 20s in defensive rating because the roster just wasn't competent enough on that end. But I think the building blocks were there, similar to how I felt about Taylor Jenkins being done dirty by Memphis this year. I think, maximally juicing the talent that he had on his roster. I really think Borrego did that in Charlotte, and, he got fired for it.
Yeah, so a 148-183 record overall with his time in Charlotte as a head coach, which is a 44%, about 45% win percentage in that time. No playoffs made, but the closest they've been anytime since Kemba Walker. He worked with the Spurs, the Hornets. He was a Magic assistant, and then most recently in this last year, he was an assistant, maybe 2 years, with Willie Green.
Yeah,
in New Orleans. So lots of his
which I don't really know.
All of these guys, a lot of these guys are tied to Pop in one way or another. This is one of the examples of a guy who's tied to Pop.
He's from the Pop coaching tree for sure. I don't really know what to say about his time in New Orleans. I think he was like the associate or the assistant next to Willie Green, but like obviously this last year was a disaster for the Pelicans. But like everyone got injured. I don't really know what else to say about that team. Or how much you could fault the coaches for that. Like they were an absolute disaster in terms of just keeping guys healthy.
I think that James Borrego, 47 years old, by the way. I mentioned I have all their ages, and I do want to bring it up. I think it's relevant. It is the type of coach where I don't like David Fizdale excites me the least. There's in some ways, the idea of James Borrego at first was a little less exciting than when I actually dug into it and did a little bit of the research. It seems to be a guy who has a really good reputation, someone who I think overperformed in his time with the Hornets, and someone who may be capable of doing well here in Phoenix if they're willing to give him the opportunity to do it. And by the way, I think there's some speculation of whether or not there were coaches who were interviewed or who didn't want to be interviewed by the Suns. I don't think that's the case. Not when you're looking for like guys like this. If they're really looking for guys whose first time, they're looking for their first time to be a head coach, you're going to interview for every single one of those opportunities. Yeah. I think there are guys like Borrego and Fizdale who you can say maybe they would turn it down because they could believe that there are other opportunities out there, but there really isn't right now. The Suns are really the only team looking for a head coach at this current moment, and there's not a lot of these jobs available. So I think they're going to get all the opportunities that they can.
Say what you will about the current leadership with the Suns. If you want to laugh at some of their moves, that's fine. I do it too. But like, you're an idiot there's 30 coaching jobs. You can't turn down opportunities to interview. Guys interview again and again and again, and it's a grueling process. But if that's really what you want, if you really want to be the head guy, you do not turn down these opportunities when they come. And sure enough, like everyone respects guys like Chris Quinn and Johnny Bryant and Mike Ginori. These are names that have come up for years for these types of jobs. So, yeah, there aren't people who are just saying no to this, unless, like you said, they're longtime veterans.
Alchemy Roast coffee is my favorite coffee. Every single morning, I start my day with coffee from Alchemy Roast, and you should too. AlchemyRoaster.com has the best coffee, and it's local here in Phoenix. They're a Metro Phoenix-based coffee roaster that focuses on the transformational process of coffee from seed to cup. They're about more than just coffee. Passion, dedication, and community. They're a small batch roastery committed to sourcing the finest beans and mastering the art of the roast, and they do it ethically. A small batch roaster, that means they're sourcing beans from all over the world for you to try, and I highly recommend you pick out some beans on alchemyroaster.com and use the promo code TIMELINE to get some beans. I just tried the single origin beans from Tanzania, and they're incredible. Amazing coffee, lightly roasted and local. Go to alchemyroaster.com, use the promo code TIMELINE, try some of their beans. They have beans from Honduras, from Tanzania, from Papua New Guinea, Guatemala, Mexico, and they're all roasted locally here in Mesa. Alchemyroaster.com, promo code TIMELINE gets you 10% off coffee. Go there, order some coffee today, give it a try. Alchemyroaster.com, promo code TIMELINE.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Let's talk about Johnny Bryant, actually, since you brought him up. And we'll go through each of these guys individually. We can't do the whole Josh Longstaff. We spent like 20 minutes talking about him on our Patreon episode last week. You can't do that with all these guys and all their names. But Longstaff did not make the second round, which I think you could have speculated when they actually announced him as a guy who interviewed, that there was a chance his agent was just trying to get his name out there as a potential head coach. But Johnny Bryant, I thought, was kind of an interesting name that was out here. Someone we had talked about before, but he is still going to be interviewing again. Like there's a couple of these guys that are directly connected to Kenny Atkinson, and this is one. You mentioned he spent time with the Jazz, he spent time with the Knicks, and now he's a Cavs assistant coach. He's 39. There's a couple of these guys that are 39, him and Dave Bliss. These are the 2 youngest candidates that are on the list for the Suns. We don't have an age verified for Sean Sweeney or Steve Hetzel, but based on their time that they went to college, they're older than that. I think we're pretty sure. And actually, Jordan Ott, we don't know his name. We'll talk about him in a second, too. But Johnny Bryant is one of those guys, I think, that if he's 39 years old, if he's interested in being a head coach, Jazz, Knicks, and Cavs, for the Suns, it's a risk. Now, he has experience. It's a risk to hire someone this young, but all of these guys have lots of experience in the NBA. There is an interesting subplot, I think, with Johnny Bryant where he currently works for the Cavs. And Matt Ishbia
I didn't even
not
think
like
about
them.
that. I did not even think about that.
And
that's funny.
There is some element of taking the guy right out of under them if he is like a future great coach in the NBA. And,
that's interesting.
And if you are successful and he ends up being a great coach, that's a nice snag, you know?
Yeah.
That's
you can say you
for Matt
poached.
Ishbia.
And even though, like, you know, look, assistants move around all the time, and like you'd be a dick to not allow someone to interview for another job and like go somewhere else. And I really don't think it's a big deal, but I totally see what you're saying in that Ishbia would view it as like, we poached their best assistant. What a win for us. Yeah. I could totally see that. For me, it's just like 10 years with Utah, the Knicks, and the Cavs. Like, he worked for good programs under multiple coaches and teams that were consistently in the playoffs. And, you know, I think an interesting subplot here actually about those teams is he's worked with Donovan Mitchell twice, both with the Jazz and the Cavs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He also worked with
and
Jalen
by the way,
Brunson.
the Knicks wanted him too. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. He also worked with Jalen Brunson with the Knicks. Like, he has experience, and I don't know, like,
yeah.
I don't know specifically what he's saying to Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell, like how much he's coached those guys. But one of my questions to him, if I could ask him a question, would be like sort of how that's informed his feelings on modern NBA offenses. He's worked with these really high octane guards who have to lead offenses the same exact way that Devin Booker is going to have to lead the Suns offense next year. So I think that would be an interesting thing that someone like Johnny Bryant should be able to speak on.
Guards are back, Sam. Look at the conference finals. It's all guards. They're all teams led by guards.
That's true. I didn't think about that. But you're right.
Donovan Mitchell calls Johnny Bryant, I believe, one of his favorite coaches. They're very close. So that it is somebody that comes with highly recommended at the very least by
It does
Donovan
feel like
Mitchell.
maybe Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell need to play together at some point in their careers.
That would be
Just
so fun.
because of how much they've been compared to each other for 10 straight years. That maybe we need to poach Donovan Mitchell and just make that our backcourt.
Good luck. Hey, why don't you come play for a much worse team? Okay. Where do you want to go next?
I gotta check guys off the list. So
Let's talk about Mike
Johnny
Nouri real quick then.
Bryant.
actually.
Let's do Mike Nouri. Okay.
Okay, so Mike Nouri I think is probably the guy that is sort of, if you were to look at all the assistant coaches and say which guy has like earned his opportunity the most to be a current head coach, it would be Mike Nouri. 51 years old, been around the NBA a long time. Raptors, Kings, Nuggets, Pistons, Michigan, and the Timberwolves. Just pointing it out. You just got to point it out when it's there. And in the Timberwolves, we talked about it. He has stepped up, and in time where their head coach wasn't able to be the head coach, he's the guy that stepped in to be that head coach in those times, including in a playoff series that they won, by the way. So Mike Nouri, 51 years old, potential future head coach, regardless of what the Suns do with him, I think. Someone who's interviewed for multiple jobs. Really fun interview. This is something even Chris Haynes talked about. Famous for his sideline interviews where he really gets into depth about basketball, but also can be kind of funny. And just been around the NBA a long time. What do you think?
We talk about coaching trees and like how much of it really matters. Who knows? But his two closest head coaches at this point, who he's worked the most with, he was with Mike Malone multiple times, both back in the Kings days, and then obviously when Mike Malone was first hired to be the Nuggets coach in 2015. When Jokic was just coming into the league, those first few years, Mike Nouri was there. And then Chris Finch later on in this current stint with the Wolves. So, yeah, I just think another guy who has a really strong resume in terms of the teams and the coaches he's worked with, for sure.
Yeah, I think this would be a hire where it would just make sense. Like, you really couldn't say that this guy has not earned his shot if he was hired by the Suns. I don't know that he'll be a good head coach, but yeah.
Who knows? But he's been on NBA sidelines for 20 years as an assistant. This is not one where you could say he's inexperienced or anything like that.
Let's talk about Jordan Ott and Steve Hetzel, because honestly, my first reaction was thinking about how none of these guys were former NBA players. My second thing that I went through was trying to figure out if there were any ties to Michigan State by any of these guys. And the two guys, we already mentioned it, that had ties to Michigan State are Jordan Ott and Steve Hetzel, who are both in this round of interviews for the Suns. And at first I was like, they better have a resume that makes sense, that gives them the opportunity to even have this interview. And honestly, they both kind of do. They both still, outside of the Michigan State thing, they both still have a resume that makes sense that they would have the opportunity to get a head coaching job.
I mean, I would say
if either of them were hired, you still got a point at the Michigan State thing. We have to. But yeah. What were you going to say?
I would say at least the fact that they have skin in the game. Both of them have been a decade plus also as assistants. Or how old is Jordan Ott, actually? Do you know?
Not sure. His age is not available online. Kind of
That's
interesting.
really interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of
at
a
least
mystery
on my
box.
initial. I'm sure somebody can find it. Yeah.
He might be 32.
Young.
He might be 74. That's
he
exciting.
looks young. Just
Does
look
a picture,
just look at a picture of him. Yeah.
Pictures of him exist online. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Jordan Ott we'll get to in a second. Steve Hetzel. I'm not going to say I would hate it because I don't know the guy. I'm a little bit more worried about just how his resume looks on paper as an assistant. He's been an assistant for like 15 years. The particular programs and head coaches that he's worked with, when you stack them up to the guys we were just talking about, Mike Nouri, Johnny Bryant, Chris Quinn, who we haven't gotten to yet, but like those guys all worked for winning teams year after year. Really good head coaches. Steve Hetzel, who, of course, graduated from Michigan State in, I think I have it written down here somewhere.
Well, actually, Kellen did a great job. Hetzel started at Michigan State in 2003.
Yes,
as a student manager, which Ishbia's last year there was 2002. Gregory was there till 03 or in 03.
So Ishbia graduated from Michigan State in 02. Hetzel graduated in Michigan State from 05. So yeah, if there was any overlap, there was 1 year of overlap between Hetzel and Gregory.
Yeah.
But still, very comparable guys. Him and Ishbia are basically the same age.
Anyway, appears to be in his early 40s. Yeah, no exact age on him, but I think you can put it together just based on his time in Michigan State.
So Steve Hetzel's last decade in the NBA, Mike, 4 years in Charlotte with Steve Clifford.
Yeah.
The guy who, I mean, I guess was okay before. This was before the Borrego hiring, right? This was the first Steve Clifford stint. Not really much to speak of in terms of success. Yeah. After that, follows Steve Clifford for 3 more years to Orlando. This was the Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier era, I guess you would call it. I don't really know what you would call it. Like maybe they made the playoffs once or twice, got swept, didn't do anything. So Charlotte, Orlando. From there, he spends the last 3 years. Well, okay, and then there's a 4th team, but he spends 3 more years alongside Chauncey Billups in Portland at the tail end of like the last dying breath of the Dame CJ era in Portland. And then finally, this past season, he goes to the Brooklyn Nets, who had just hired Jordi Fernandez. Like, I don't believe in definitively holding anything against an assistant coach based on if they happen to be on a bunch of bad teams. That doesn't mean they're a bad coach. I'm just 100%. saying that resume is absolutely a lot worse than some of these other guys, which makes me a little bit worried when I see that he went to Michigan State. I just have to be honest.
No, and not only that he went to Michigan State, but also that he probably met Brian Gregory at his time in Michigan State, right? So it's not just that he went there, it's also that he's, Brian Gregory, I mentioned it, he could tell the story of I knew you when you were this tall for Devin Booker and for Matt Ishbia, and he could do that now for Steve Hetzel as well. So you got to at least put it out there as something that could be possible. I agree with you that there's still a resume there. Like, he's worked in the NBA a long time. It's not like he's coming directly out of college. Chauncey Billups has actually done a good job in the NBA. I think his teams have not been great, but I think he's actually turned out to be kind of a pretty good coach, at least last season. And Jordi Fernandez kind of rocks. That team sucked, but he seems like a really smart coach. By the way, a candidate that the Suns were really high on before they ended up hiring Bud. But yeah, I guess it was Vogel that they almost hired there.
Yeah, it was Vogel, I think.
Jordan Ott, on the other hand, the other MSU alum, did not have time with Matt Ishbia or Brian Gregory there. He's younger than them. I'm guessing he's in his late 30s, early 40s at the oldest. I'm guessing late 30s. He was with the Hawks when Budenholzer was there. He was in Brooklyn for Kenny Atkinson, Jacques Vaughn, and Steve Nash. So
the KD era, including
was there during the KD era,
among other things. But
yeah, across all 3 of those coaches, which is kind of interesting. He was with the Lakers with Ham, and then most recently now he's with the Cavs with Kenny Atkinson again. So obviously working with Kenny Atkinson again, and that's a lot of good teams. That's just a lot of good teams that he spent time with. Kenny Atkinson, a really smart coach.
I think something that's interesting here is between his time in Brooklyn and LA. Again, who knows what his personal relationship is with those guys, but just to be able to say you coached both Kevin Durant and LeBron James, those are big personalities, big teams, where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations every time those guys take the floor. And I think that matters. I think it's something to point to on your resume where you're not just saying, I coached Miles Bridges on the Charlotte Hornets,
Paul Millsap.
Right? Like, I coached guys who were, if you can say I coached guys who were Hall of Famers, who knew every time they went. And I mean, to your point, he was also on the Atlanta Hawks with Paul Millsap and Jeff Teague and whatever.
Yeah.
But that team was really, really good, so they get away with it. I think Ott is interesting. And as you pointed out, he's younger than Ishbia and Hetzel, but he did work at Michigan State for 5 years in the late 2000s.
Yeah. He's about Brian Gregory's, like a grandson age for him.
Oh, God.
But yeah, I actually, looking more at his resume, I thought, okay, actually, maybe this would be pretty good. And the fact that he's young and seems to be highly respected, at least based on what I found people talking about him. I'm not out on Jordan Ott. I expected to be. I honestly expected to be out on Jordan Ott when I figured out the MSU connection here. The other guys that we've missed that we should at least talk about briefly, Sean Sweeney, who's an assistant coach with the Mavericks. The assistant coach with the Mavericks, honestly, that I expected to not be the one we were talking about here. I expected it to be Jared Dudley. He worked in Brooklyn as well. Like, a lot of these guys have time. I don't know if that was when Kenny Atkinson was there. Actually, I don't have the years.
No, it's,
Milwaukee, Detroit, and Dallas.
I could tell you exactly what it is. Sean Sweeney is Jason Kidd's most faithful disciple because he worked with Jason Kidd in Brooklyn and in Milwaukee and in Dallas. He's, like, assistant coaches follow guys around. Definitely it happens. But working with the same head coach for 3 different teams, I feel like doesn't happen that much. And so I was a little surprised when I saw that. Sean Sweeney has worked with Jason Kidd 3 separate times. He also worked with Dwayne Casey in Detroit. Actually, I think that means he was on the same staff as, who else were we just talking about was in Detroit? Was it someone else was in Detroit recently, and I can't remember.
Yes.
One of these other guys. It's a lot to keep track
Mike
of.
Inori, maybe?
It might have been Mike Inori.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sean Sweeney has spent a lot of time with Jason Kidd over the past 10 years. What does that mean?
Steve Hetzel actually was with the Pistons at one point too. So I don't know if that overlapped, but yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe Steve Hetzel was the guy. What does that mean for Sean Sweeney's philosophy? I have no idea. I'm just throwing it out there. That's what stood out to me.
Yeah, been around a long time and actually has been brought up in multiple previous coaching searches. And this is somebody I think who seems to be viewed in a lot of NBA circles as a future NBA coach. Nothing, I think, really. I think that Jason Kidd has done a pretty good job overall. Obviously, they made the NBA Finals, but had a real rocky start to his head coaching career in Brooklyn and then Milwaukee, but has sort of found his footing in Dallas. And they've done a good job and pulled the rug out of under him a little bit, obviously, this last year.
Certainly, anything you say about Dallas now, it's like you can't hold that against Kidd, really. I just remembered the Kidd was in one of the press conferences that they made Nico do, right? I can't remember. Yeah,
he said he didn't know about the trade. Yeah,
I mean, of course, and I believe him, but also just some of,
but I don't care.
Some of the faces he was making and the uncomfortable, you could just feel him kind of uncomfortably shifting in his chair every time Nico opened his mouth, which I thought was funny. So who knows? Maybe he would like to be saved from that organization and move on to a different organization soon too. I don't know. Although they did just get gifted Cooper Flag. But yeah, Sweeney is interesting. Who's
Bliss,
on the list?
I want to talk about Dave Bliss.
Dave Bliss.
He's 39 years old, and this is the most exciting fact about him: 6'10".
Whoa!
6'10" head coach. How about that?
Who did he play? He must have played basketball, right?
He could play on our team right now, based on his age and height. OKC for
Do
like
I smell
5 years early.
Drew Eubanks, fuck. Drew Eubanks was last year. A Mason Plumlee. God, this is how long it's been since I've watched the Suns play basketball. I already forgot who played on the team last year. Yeah. A Mason Plumlee replacement.
He'll
Dave
be back
Bliss.
if James Borrego's back. Don't worry.
Oh, God. Don't say
that. OKC now, but also in like 2010 to 2015, Dave Bliss. And then from 2015 to 2018, between his 2 stints in OKC, he was with the Knicks. So spent time also with the Knicks during an era that was a little bit rocky for the Knicks.
But Jeff
Dave Bliss,
Hornacek Knicks.
Since 2018, so for a long time now, 7 years, has been with OKC. And obviously OKC has been really well coached in the most recent years. 39 years old. This is another of the youngest. There's 2 guys that are 39. Dave Bliss, and then, let me see, Johnny Bryant are for sure 39. I would guess that Jordan Ott is around that age as well. So these are the youngest candidates that the Suns are currently interviewing in this overall process. His resume relies pretty heavily on his time with OKC, but I think that matters, right?
That's 90% of it. I think what's interesting when you've worked for OKC for the past 6 years as he has, it's not just like he came in 2023 when they started making the playoffs, although that's important too. Dave Bliss has been with the Thunder through everything.
It matters.
He was there. Yeah. He was there when Alexei Pokusevski was playing 2,000 minutes in a season, and now he's still there when they're the favorites to win the NBA Finals. And so I think a candidate like that could speak to how do you come in and prioritize development of certain guys and figure out like really like how do you set your rotations, how do you establish a culture, how do you build an identity, and then do it all organically.
How do you rebuild from the ground up? Which
yeah,
well, the Suns might have to do it.
But here's the thing. So like maybe if you hire a guy like that, you're thinking about a full tear down. But maybe you're just like we all know that the Suns need more young players. It doesn't have to be a full tear down, but we all know that the next iteration of the team needs to have a bunch of like. They need 23-year-olds somewhere on the roster. We all know that. And so a guy coming from OKC probably knows a lot about development. That's all they've done for the past half decade.
Yeah. I don't know. I like him. It's irrational. I like the idea of a 6'10" head coach. I just like the idea of him getting in a ref's face or,
Do you remember the one coach? God, I can't remember what era it was for the Suns now. Was it maybe the Hornacek era Suns, but do you remember when we had that assistant Mike Longobardi, who was like 5'6" on the or like 5'5" or something? But he would be like the defensive coordinator, and he would just be on the sideline, just like ass up in the air, like showing the players, how to assume their defensive stance, like with such vigor in everything he did. But it was so funny because he was like 5'5", which by itself is like not that hilarious, but it was the contrast. Like if you hire a 6'10" head coach like Dave Bliss, his top assistant needs to be max 5'4". It needs to be like a Manute Bol, Muggsy Bogues situation, 100%.
He'd be the tallest head coach, for sure. There's no coach currently taller. I don't know. He might be one of the tallest ever. I think you'd probably have to go back to player coaches before you get. We talked about Kurt Rambis. What is he, like 6'8", 6'9"? He was probably
Bill
the
Russell.
last super tall coach.
Bill Russell coached the Celtics at one point.
He was a player coach. Yeah,
so he
was definitely. Yeah. I don't know. Was he taller than 6'10" though? He probably was around 6'10".
He's probably like 6'10". 6'10" back then was like 7'4" now. So
yeah, exactly. So Dave Bliss, he's another guy that's out there. And then of course Chris Quinn, which we talked about. Chris Quinn, his resume is pretty straightforward. He's been with the Miami Heat since 2014. He's the only guy on this list that played in the NBA. He played for the Heat, the Nets, the Spurs, and then the Cavs. Obviously, the Heat was the biggest game changer for him because he's been with them for 11 years now, which I think is cool too. He's 41. He's still pretty young. He retired young.
That's
from the
very
NBA.
young. Yeah, 41 to have 10 years of assistant experience and only be 41. Now, here's what I'm curious about. Chris Quinn. I want to say off the top of my head, he did play with James Jones. Or am I lying about that?
Well, Heat, Nets, no, actually, yeah, you know what? Maybe he did. It might have been.
I don't know. He might not have. I could be lying.
Yeah. It might have been the Cavs, honestly, where he did. Because he actually was in the NBA, then he left the NBA, played overseas for a while, and then came back for one season with the Cavs for some weird reason.
Oh, it was with Miami. He did play on one of the pre-LeBron Miami teams. James Jones was already there, and Chris Quinn was also there. Yeah, so they've definitely played together in the NBA. Now, James Jones isn't really calling the shots anymore. I just think that's an interesting connection.
I'd be shocked if Chris Quinn wasn't a head coach one day. He's just a guy that's constantly mentioned in these conversations. Maybe he's not a great interview. I don't know, because he's been interviewed quite a few times, it seems like, for a head coaching job, and then hasn't gotten it. So we'll see if that ends up happening for the Suns.
Maybe it's like Kawhi Leonard in the draft interviews where Suns passed on him because he like sweated profusely. Maybe it's like that.
He's been sweating ever since. Of all these names, who's the most exciting to you?
It's hard to choose a single name, just based on. I feel like a lot of these guys, like without knowing more about them personally, which obviously we as fans can't know, a lot of their resumes are equal. I could maybe give you like a tier 1 and tier 2. And tier
Are either
1
of the MSU guys on your tier 1?
No, frankly, no.
Yeah,
and that's sort of
to me. I'm like, we're looking at all these names, but 2 of them went to MSU. It's like, should we only be talking about 2 names here?
This is what I want to ask you. So we have 9 candidates here, and we've just spent 40 minutes talking about them, which go us. If you had to give higher betting odds, we at the Timeline here support gambling. If you had to give higher betting odds,
we have to. It's part of our contract.
To the 2 MSU guys or the field, what would you pick? 2 versus 7.
Oh, the MSU guys for sure.
Yeah.
I think that Jordan Ott's going to be the head coach of the Suns. If I had to just guess, but that doesn't. By the way, I have no idea. I'm just saying, if I had to choose one of these guys, I would choose him. And Steve Hetzel's right there with him. And the other guys have a chance. I don't really know, and maybe even David Fizdale, because he really knows the team, is higher in these rankings than we're giving him credit for.
It's possible. I would love to learn, I'm sure reporters are going to do their digging, and I would love to watch more interviews with all of these guys and just try and learn as much as possible. If I had to give you like a tier 2 right now is probably the 2 MSU guys. And of course we call them the MSU guys. I think
Hetzel might be at the bottom of my list.
I feel like I can.
It's not to
I
say
feel
that
like
he couldn't be a good head coach, but yeah.
I feel like I just convinced you on that because I feel like when you first brought his name up 20 minutes ago, you were kind of into him.
No,
then I brought up the teams
I was
he
more
actually
into the
worked
idea
for.
of Jordan Ott. Like once I did the research, it was Jordan Ott that I was like, actually, this resume is not as bad as I thought.
Yeah,
But only one of them is 6'10".
So I don't want to be overly
So
derogatory.
throw that out there.
Yeah,
Dave Bliss is in my tier 1. He's 6'10".
My tier 2 is Hetzel and Ott, the 2 MSU guys. I don't mean that in a derogatory way because I understand both of them have lots of NBA experience as well. It's just we know what the connection is. And then maybe Fizdale, because I don't really think they need that continuity. And maybe Sean Sweeney. I don't know that I'm overly impressed by spending a ton of time with Jason Kidd personally.
Yeah, I think I agree with that too. And I think he might be a good coach in the future anyway. It's not an impressive resume, yeah.
Yeah, and none of this is to completely write these guys off. It's just if you had to make me choose, I think probably the other 5 guys are more or less equally interesting to me.
It's just, to me, I love the way OKC plays. And so I kind of lean towards the guy that's been with OKC for a long time too. But outside of that, I think
just love how we're talking about coaches as you want the draft combine was this week. They should have taken measurables.
Well, one of them's 39 and 6'10". Yeah.
Yeah, I want wings.
He's young and tall.
I want shuttle runs on all of these guys.
That's true.
I want wingspans.
Who do you think the fastest is?
The fastest shuttle run?
Probably
Chris Quinn.
Chris Quinn, yeah.
Chris Quinn's a former NBA player. I feel
the most natural athlete of all of them.
Yeah.
I think he could probably still beat Jared Dudley in a race too if we had to put them on the list
I would
as well.
it.
I might be able to beat Jared Dudley in a race at this point. All right. Anything else on the coaches?
I don't think so. We're going to narrow this down.
Hopefully next week we're back with talking
more research. Yeah.
All right, you got to trade. It's your week. We have less time than we normally have when we get to this segment. I really have no idea what you're going to do because we haven't had any chance to talk about what we're going to do this week. We do a fake trade for those who are maybe listening because there's actual news that haven't listened a lot in the last few weeks. At the end of every podcast, we trade off creating a fake trade, sometimes realistic, sometimes unrealistic. This week is Sam's turn to create one.
Yeah, I didn't do anything too crazy this week, in my opinion. I have done some crazy ones in the past. There was one week where you challenged me to make a 5-team trade. Maybe I challenged myself, and I did that.
I think you did.
I tried to trade Bradley Beal a few times, tried to trade for Trae Young, Domantas Sabonis, star-type players. The Ja Morant, Zion Williamson package is still one of my personal favorites. I did like that one, too. Anyway,
people without any context about that on Twitter really thought you were insane.
Yeah, well, I am, so it's okay. I tried to play it a little bit straighter this week and kind of go back to basics, but there is a logic behind it, and so it's still KD trades, and it's still KD to the classic teams like Houston, San Antonio. The added flair that I'm giving it is in the context of now that the lottery has been set and the draft order is set, are there other teams that might be interested in moving up, and could we use other teams moving up as a way to aid us in a KD package? So that was sort of the goal. Not just, because when we started doing this 10 weeks ago at this point, we were just doing 2-team trades, which obviously is always the easiest way to do it. But it would be KD to Houston, and Houston sends us Jalen Green. And we don't like Jalen Green. So doubly so after the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out other stuff. Okay, so I have 2 packages here, a Houston one and a San Antonio one.
Okay.
Do you want to
Let's
choose?
go Houston.
All right, Houston I think is kind of boring, but here it is. A 3-team trade. The Houston Rockets get Kevin Durant. They also get the Suns' 29th pick in the first round this year. The Phoenix Suns get, I'll just say the third team here is Brooklyn. The Phoenix Suns get Nick Claxton, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, picks number 19 and 26 in the first round this year from Brooklyn. Maybe something else from Houston if they can strangle something else away from them. Cam Whitmore or something, that'd be nice. Brooklyn gets Jalen Green. They also get the 10th pick from Houston. That's the entire trade. What I did here is just try and route Jalen Green to a third team.
Yeah.
Let me talk through the logic for each team a little bit. The logic for Houston is you get Kevin Durant. I think that's pretty obvious.
They're giving up a lot for him, though. But yeah.
Do you think so?
Well, I think if you factor in Jalen Green as a negative asset, then no. But not a lot of people seem to. I don't know. It's like people in Houston don't seem to think he's a negative asset. That could all just be.
Basically, I was just trying. Here's where I started. I just started from a place of what team could want Jalen Green, because I don't know how teams value Jalen Green either. So then I said, well, Brooklyn, that might be a Jalen Green team. Cam Thomas is also, by the way, a restricted free agent this summer. Right. I don't know if they like Cam Thomas.
Get a new Cam Thomas, yeah.
Cam Thomas and Jalen Green are kind of the same player already.
Yeah.
I don't know if they want to pay Cam Thomas. They could, but
Jalen Green's bigger, which I think does still matter if you're going to try to salvage anything out of him.
But so basically, I told myself, like, I think Brooklyn is a team that could talk themselves into Jalen Green for a couple of years while they rebuild.
Yes,
and
they have a ton of cap space, and they could use picks for that cap space. Like, that's one of the reasons you have it.
If they don't like Jalen Green that much and they honestly view him as more of a neutral to even negative asset, I slipped the 10th pick from Houston in there as, I wouldn't even say a sweetener, I would say the main incentive for Brooklyn in this trade.
It's the reason they're in it. Yeah.
They have 4 first-round picks this year, Mike, and the highest one is number 8. And through this trade, they move 19 and 26, so we get 2 first-round picks now. Instead of 1, we move up. And we don't just move up, we get to take 2 players in the first round. But Brooklyn now has 2 top 10 picks. They have number 8 and they have number 10.
Maybe they
and
can
they have Jalen
trade
Green.
Those to get the 5th or something. Yeah.
I think for Phoenix, honestly, this trade is not super exciting, even though I know I'm a Suns fan.
I think it's incredibly exciting because I'm become a little disillusioned with the idea of KD trade packages.
It's
lately,
possible.
So.
I think, look, you could easily slot Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, and Nick Claxton could be your starting 3, 4, 5 next year next to Devin Booker. It's a lot of athleticism. It's a lot of size. Jabari Smith can shoot. And you get 2
switching, and it'd be an interesting.
And you get 2 first-round picks. So I think, like, clearly, if you're trying to compete next year and get like capable role players who can build you a grittier identity, that's what I was trying to accomplish here. I think the disappointing element of it for some Suns fans is if you look at this package, unless you really believe in Jabari Smith, there's not really a future star. It's just a bunch of role players, unless you like hit on the 19th pick this year, which is unlikely, let's be honest. Like, those are probably 2 more role players that you're drafting. So it's just, it's a potpourri package. But if you're okay with a potpourri package for KD with maybe a little bit of Jabari Smith upside, then okay, it's a decent return, I think.
What if Whitmore was in Easton's place?
Yeah, you could do that. Would you rather do that?
I'm trying to find ways to make it a little more palatable for Brooklyn. I'm sorry, for Houston.
For Houston,
just really trying to think it through. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you still like that?
Because they have the
Whitmore?
10th pick. I still would do it. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be as excited, but yeah, it's still kind of interesting. Good stuff. I like that one. I think maybe Brooklyn would probably not want to include 2 picks. I think they probably would say maybe 1. In this case,
but they have too. I mean, you might be right. They just have too many. I was like, you have 4 first-round picks. Move 2 off, and I'm gifting them a top 10 pick. So it's only a net loss of 1.
They could probably still do it for 1 and then just move 1 for something else. A future first-round pick or something. Yeah.
Would you like a Spurs package?
Yeah.
Here's a Spurs package. I actually like this one better, and I think this one actually, honestly, makes more sense too. I'll explain why.
Okay.
The Spurs get Kevin Durant, no surprise, and also the Suns' 29th pick. I moved the 29th pick in both of these packages because it's relevant. We're moving up in the draft both times.
Okay.
Second team here is the Utah Jazz. The Phoenix Suns get the 5th overall pick from the Utah Jazz. Lauri Markkanen, Bryce Sensabaugh, and maybe a future first from San Antonio in 2028, 2029, 2030, don't really care. Just like something down the line. That's the move. The Utah Jazz get the 2nd overall pick in this year's NBA draft because remember, San Antonio lucked into that. And then they get Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, salary filler to replace Lauri Markkanen. Here's the
Sohan's interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think any
Not
of those
good, but interesting.
none of those three are bad players, but it's like Lauri Markkanen costs $45 million. You have to take in salary. Here's the motivation. For San Antonio, I think, San Antonio fans bitch a lot. Oh, what? We don't need Kevin Durant. Let's just get Giannis. Okay, well, here's the thing. If you guys are going to trade for Giannis, and they could, and it would be fascinating, don't get me wrong, absolutely fascinating to watch Giannis and Wemby together. But if you trade for Giannis, you're giving up the farm, okay? You're giving up the second pick that you lucked into that you don't deserve. You're also giving up Devin Vassell. You're also giving up Stephon Castle. You're trading for Giannis. What I have done here, I should be thanked by all San Antonio fans everywhere, because what I have accomplished with this package is I have given San Antonio Kevin Durant, who is the Giannis Antetokounmpo consolation prize, without them surrendering Devin Vassell or Stephon Castle. Their starting five after this trade, Mike, could potentially look like De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama. That would be San Antonio's starting five. If you can't win with that, I'm sorry. You're ass. Your cheeks.
You have a 2-year window to do it, but then you still have enough assets to try to extend that window down the line.
And you're still consistently getting better because Castle's still on the team. Like, yes, they're giving up the second pick. That's the thing. You have to give up the second pick to get a superstar, which Kevin Durant is still a superstar. You didn't deserve that second pick. You weren't that bad this year. I know teams don't think like that, but frankly, you didn't deserve that second pick. It shouldn't be that hard for you to part with it. And critically, the reason Utah is looped in here is who is possibly more butthurt in the NBA right now at the fact that they do not have one of the top two picks in the NBA draft.
That was a good trade for them, yeah.
Than the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz spent...
For them.
The Utah Jazz
and Markkanen had a poor season, as we've talked about in the past.
He didn't
exactly raise his trade value this last year.
I think they're out on Markkanen. I think Markkanen's still a really good player, but they have not shown Markkanen any reason to believe that there's like a committed relationship there for the future, that they're really building around him. What Utah needs is they know that they're about to go through a long rebuild. They're already in a long rebuild that might take 4 or 5 years, and they still don't have the guy. Well, here you go. You got shafted in the lottery with the 5th pick. I'm allowing you to move up to the 2nd pick, and everyone, absolutely everyone in this draft, if you don't know anything about this draft yet, here's all you need to know to start you off. Everyone says it's Cooper Flagg, it's Dylan Harper, and then it's everyone else. I'm giving you a chance after you got shafted to move up to number 2 and take Dylan Harper. Now, if I'm the Suns, would I love to just cut Utah out of this trade, get the number 2 pick ourselves, and take Dylan Harper? Yeah, that sounds awesome. But assuming that that's like maybe not a very likely reality, while I would love to see, just in the same way that I would love to trade directly with Nico Harrison for Cooper Flagg, it's not going to happen. So I think in this reality, if you're Utah, you get some salary, whatever, you get the 2nd pick, you take Dylan Harper, and now you actually have a future to believe in. You can build around something. If you're Phoenix, yes, the 5th pick is not the 2nd pick, but it's pretty fucking good. Let's be real. Like, you've got Lauri Markkanen, who is an in his prime star, who I think you're buying low on, who can easily slot in next to Devin Booker, play the power forward position, shoot a ton of threes, average 20 points per game, and is like not so old that you have to worry about his timeline. So I think he's good. Bryce Sensabaugh, by the way, don't know how much you like him. I included him for a reason in this trade. He was one of the bright spots for Utah in their horrendous second half of this season. I think he averaged 16 points per game post All-Star break, is a 6'6" wing, shoots 40% from 3. Don't think he's a future star or anything, but he's a role player for sure. And if you end up this summer in a position where you also decide you want to trade Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen, I think you would miss those guys a lot less if you have a guy like Sensabaugh coming in. But really, the main draw is you get Lauri Markkanen, who can help you win right now, and you also get the 5th overall pick, which will be a very important building block for your future.
Good work. Very creative. I would do both of those. In a heartbeat. I think both of those have very exciting elements to them. I hope, like I said, I've become a little disillusioned to what the Suns could potentially get in a trade. I hope they find something that's close to some of the options that you gave there.
I assume, I'm just curious, you haven't done enough draft research to know, like, if the Suns had a 5th pick, if there's
I haven't
anyone
even looked that high. Yeah, because I think there is a possibility that we should look, at least at stuff that's around the 10th pick if Houston's actually interested in KD, and try to scout that area. But I haven't gone that high, no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert. I think it's interesting just because, like, people will always say, oh, I don't know if there's anyone with really star potential, but, like, inevitably there are stars.
Someone is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Someone in the late lottery is going to end up being a star that just no one saw coming. But I do think it's kind of interesting because, like, those guys in the back of the top 10, like, I don't know, you could go with, like, Carter Bryant, who's like the Arizona freshman, who's like a raw project, but like has all the tools or whatever. I know Trey Johnson was also a freshman at Texas. He's a guard and would just be like going all in on scoring, like an all offense type of guard. You could go with the Duke big man, whose name I don't really know how to pronounce. I think it's Maluach, who's like the Gobert-esque figure of this draft, where he's like just a rim runner, but probably has the highest defensive ceiling of maybe anyone in the class outside of like Cooper Flagg. Yeah. I just think it's interesting that you could go in a number of different directions if you had a pick that high. And I would be curious to see, like, if the Suns had a pick that high, who they draft in that position would then be kind of like foreshadowing of their overall strategy for the summer, if you know what I mean.
Good stuff. You got anything else?
No, those are my only trades. Those are my only trades for the week.
Excellent
we do have
work.
to talk more about the draft, but I think we're going to push it off to next week.
Quickly, just pick one of the 4 teams left to win the finals. Who do you think it's going to be?
Who do I think it's going to be, or who do I want it to be?
Either one. You can choose either way.
It's going to be the Thunder. I think I'm rooting for the Pacers, though. That seems fun.
All right. I like that. I think I'm rooting for the Knicks. I think I don't think I would pick the Thunder, but that would not surprise me at all. I'm going to just pick the Knicks, actually. I'm just doing it. Good stuff. So, all right, that's all we got.
Where are you at? Just real quick, where are you at with Knicks fans? Videos that are shared online of Knicks fans.
I hope that we can be obnoxious again one day. It looks like fun. Look, some of them are obviously taking it way too far, and that happens.
Yeah, there was a video.
That happens with every fan base. Yeah.
There was a video of like 50 of them harassing a guy in a Halliburton jersey.
Yeah, leave that guy alone. Leave Brian Windhorst alone too. I saw.
Yeah, and leave Brian Windhorst alone and all that. But like then but
the rest of them are just having fun and being obnoxious in their own little fan community, and that I hope that we get to experience again as a fan base one day. That's all I got. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back with a midweek episode, or who knows, at any moment it could be an emergency podcast to congratulate one of the 2 MSU guys on getting the Suns job. So we appreciate you all for listening. Patreon.com/thetimeline if you want to sign up there. By the way, don't forget to go to alchemyroaster.com, buy some coffee, use the promo code timeline. Lots of people having some good coffee there. We appreciate you all. We'll be back very soon.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.